As I normally do every day, I wake up and I read the news from all over the world, all the different information. I spend a good few hours every day doing this. And there are a few articles now talking about the value of EVs, saying that it is actually less than an ICE vehicle, an internal combustion engine vehicle, after 2 years. And they're also saying that it is only worth 25% or so of its original value after 5 years. This is, I think, misrepresentation of the truth. So hence my video today. So what is actually happening? Why is it a bit, different? So I genuinely think that the media are hyping up these quite damaging stories to get some clicks on their content, and they do this all over about different topics, of course. So Sean Hanley from Toyota, he's the sales and marketing boss, said one of the biggest issues for electric cars is the residual values. They are plummeting. They're plummeting. Over the past 5 years to 10 years, the intrinsic value of electric vehicles has seen a huge change, and it's comparable to, I would argue that it is comparable to the change that we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s with computers, where they got significantly better and the prices every year changed, every single year. So within 2 or 3 years, your computer could, effectively be, a lot less a bit rubbish when it's 3 years old, So in contrast to the relatively unchanged value of internal combustion engine vehicles, ICE cars have maintained a pretty steady value proposition with incremental improvements, slightly better efficiency, more refinement, generally speaking, hence why they are a very finesse product at this point. They really, really are, because effectively an internal combustion engine is, cranks, conrods, valves, pistons, all sorts of stuff that are basically 150-year-old technology or more, very old-fashioned technology. EVs have evolved dramatically, overcoming initial barriers such as limited range, high costs, inadequate charging infrastructure initially. If you remember, like the Nissan Leaf, that was quite expensive. There were basically no charging infrastructure in the UK in, like, say, 2012, very little. And it's without a doubt very early days, even now, even though you can go and choose from a selection of EVs. Modern EVs offer much longer ranges, making them viable now. If you can afford to buy one, they're viable, aren't they? Like a Tesla Model 3 with a good range. Completely viable car, compared with the old Nissan Leaf, for example, which, by the way, I still think they're amazing cars if you live in a cold climate. And vehicles like the iMeave, I always had a soft spot for the iMeave, even though it's not like the same as a Tesla or something that you'd go trucking down the coast in, but I think they're a really awesome car. And the Renault Zoe, even though that had a 1-star safety rating for, is it Euro NCAP or ANCAP in Australia? So advancements in EV technology and manufacturer readiness and the increased market pressures are making them cheaper, and what you get for your money is a better product in the end. And now we have the option of paying less money to begin with. So consider the BYD Dolphin, for example, or the Atto 3, not incredibly expensive really, or the Tesla Model 3, all great value for money. The growth of the charging networks and has enhanced the practicality of EVs for daily use, or for long trips and long distance travel, or even abroad. For example, in like Europe, you can drive from like the UK, for example, down to like Italy and then back, and it's not the biggest deal anymore. Like, it is still a bit of a deal, but it's not impossible for sure. And even though people like Mike Brewer say that we are only putting in something like 50 new chargers per day rather than about the required 800 to meet where we need to be at, we are still able to use our EVs now most of the time with no problems and get by. So it's not the end of the world. So used electric vehicles take longer to sell in Australia than petrol and diesel cars, and have below average retained value. And that was from a new report. So the report was from 2023, Australian used car market, dubbed the automotive Insights report, I think it was called, was compiled by automotive data analytics company Autograb and the Australian Automotive Dealers Association. And I think it was just those people that wrote the whole report, unless I'm missing someone. So there was a very interesting report, Australian report, sorry. This is specific to Australia, but I guess it may be a little bit comparable, or you could reconcile it to other countries. But, Australia, there was a certain sort of lag, for example, between when they started to take on board EVs versus like the UK and Norway, for example. Talking about the data from the used vehicle market, and so it's a bit confusing. So I'll try to be clear when I say some of the details, because I have to be quite specific with the wording, and you might just get a bit confusing. The report highlighted that the sale of EVs through private and dealership channels nearly doubled in 2023, reaching 11,652 total electric vehicle sales within a used car market of over 2 million units. So Tesla was the leading brand in the used electric vehicle market, and they had 4,377 vehicle sales sold in 2023, capturing 37.6% of the used car market, I think it was. So this was significantly higher than MG's 14%, or 14.1%, I should say, share. That was 1,638 sales last year, and 8.4% of the share was given to Nissan, because they sold 980 electric vehicles. Interestingly, EVs less than 2 years old were selling for 98.1% of their original retail price in February 2023. But this figure dropped to 82.8% of their original retail price by December. So for EVs less than 2 years old. EVs aged 2 to 4 years saw their value decreased by another 23.4%. So 57.6% of their initial purchase price, retention of their value by year's end. So I hope that makes sense. The time it took to sell younger EVs increased from 51 days to 75 days, with older EVs taking longer to sell than those powered by other fuel types, indicating a shift from 54 to nearly 77 days. So the overall used market saw an 11.6% reduction in resale value over this year, with the average selling time ending at about 51 days. Several factors influenced these trends in used EV sales, including the fringe benefits, or the tax basically. It's all about money, isn't it? Fringe benefit tax exemption introduced in November 2022, which likely led to an increase in the supply of used EVs as owners upgraded. Concerns over battery health and the decreasing price of new EV models were also noted as reasons for potentially affecting used EV prices, although the report's authors cautioned that these findings might be volatile due to the small volume of vehicles involved in total. So in comparison, sales of used hybrids hit 56,870, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, PHEVs, reached 1,208. Petrol and diesel engines dominated the used market with more than 1.3 million vehicles and over 600,000 sales out of that, respectively. Toyota led the used car market with 328,400, and I think it was 431, doubling the figures of Mazda and Ford. The Ford Ranger also sold a little bit more than the Toyota Hilux, with both models seeing sales more than 60,000 last year. So there was more than 60,000 Ford Rangers, more than 60,000 Toyota Hiluxes sold in Australia last year, 2023. So basically, EVs aren't doing terrible at all, and I would say that actually, with the exception to the older EVs with a lesser intrinsic value, i.e. EVs with short ranges and no battery cooling, they're not doing so badly, actually. The EVs from this last several years now, properly built EVs with what I'm going to dub as comprehensive battery cooling, not pretend passive battery cooling, such as the Teslas and BYD cars, they will be fine after 200,000 kilometers, and their battery health will still be totally usable and make the car a viable purchase in 10 years time, for example. And they are sufficient enough in the first instance that losing 5 or 10% over 2,000 of the capacity over 200,000 kilometers doesn't really alter the perceived intrinsic value that one may have. So I would still absolutely buy a Tesla Model 3, for example, with 200,000 kilometers on the clock, if the price was reflective of that, if it was okay. But no doubt, it will be able to do another 200,000 kilometers, because Teslas aren't so bad these days, honestly. But the Tesla Model S, for example, from 2015, 16, they would have like the pyro fuse on the battery go, and then Tesla would say you need to replace the whole battery, and that was expensive. That's an area where you mustn't have an issue. You really need to feel safe in the car you buy with a big battery, and that sort of thing isn't going to happen. And then once that's sorted, how are the motors? How are the bearings? How's the electronic components? Tesla really have been nailing every single nail that's sticking up. They're hitting them, they're fixing them. So, like for example, the door handle that would fail miserably on the Model S. That was something that by 200,000 kilometers, quite a few people had reported having, replaced 3 of the handles and had an issue with the battery. And also, Tesla won't repair a motor. They won't take a motor out, replace the bearings in it, for example, and give it a clean out and blow it out a bit. You can do that if you're doing it yourself or you pay a local mechanic, but Tesla won't do it. They will simply say if your motor is making a hum, you need to buy a new motor, and that's not okay. So the less these things happen, of course, makes it's better. So feel free to use the comments section to voice your opinion. And I know that some people will disagree with some stuff, because basically whenever I state numbers, there is always someone that disagrees. And if I even go near mentioning Teslas, then there's always someone who says that I love Tesla. I've literally never loved Teslas. And that's quite obvious to anyone who's watched this channel for the last couple of years. They have become more, much more viable as their reliability has increased to an adequate level since 2019 or so. Since then, they've become something I would consider buying, and they're quite good. So thank you for watching, and have at the comments. And that's Mimi, by the way. He's asleep. That's Mimi. So he's actually the cat. No, he's the cat of the house. So thank you. Mimi. Hey, buddy. Hey. You want to say hello to everyone? Hey? Good boy. Yeah, there you go.